In 2025, the world celebrated. We thought we finally found Amelia Earhart's plane in the deep ocean. We were wrong. It was just a rock. But while everyone was staring at the abyss, they missed the real evidence, hiding in plain sight in a shallow lagoon. This is the Taraia Object, and classified files suggest she didn't crash. She landed.
You know, for almost 100 years, it's been one of the biggest mysteries out there. An absolute icon just vanishes from the sky. But in just the last year, the search for Amelia Earhart has taken some wild, unbelievable turns. So let's get into the latest chapter of this incredible story. And here she is, the legend herself, Amelia Earhart. Back in 1937, she was on this incredibly bold mission to fly around the entire globe. But somewhere over the massive Pacific Ocean, she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, just disappeared. It kicked off what was, at the time, the biggest search and rescue mission in American history. Thing is, they were never found, and that left a mystery that has fascinated people for, 87 years now? But just recently, the search has taken some crazy, almost whiplash-inducing turns. So you have to ask, are we finally about to get an answer? Okay, so this new chapter in the story, it starts with a super high-tech hunt way down in the crushing depths of the ocean. And in early 2024, the entire world was absolutely buzzing over what looked like a massive breakthrough. And this wasn't some small-time operation. A private company called Deep Sea Vision, funded by a guy who sold off his real estate, put together an $11 million expedition. I mean, these guys were serious. They had the money, and they had the cutting-edge tech to match. And the guy who funded the whole thing, Tony Romeo, he's a pilot, a former Air Force intelligence officer. He just perfectly summed up the feeling of the mission with this quote. You can tell, for him, this wasn't just some project. This was a real, honest-to-God treasure hunt. And then they found this. Just look at it. This blurry, kind of ghostly image captured by a drone, 16,000 feet down. They found it not even 100 miles from where she was supposed to land. And for the first time in decades, it really, truly felt like we were looking at her plane. And you can totally see why everybody lost their minds, right? The size, that unique twin-tail shape, it just looks so much like Earhart's famous plane. The internet absolutely exploded. Everyone was asking the same thing. Could this finally be it? But in a mystery this old, it's just never that easy, is it? All that hope, all that excitement, it was about to come to a screeching halt. So Deep Sea Vision had to plan a trip back to get eyes on it for real. And for almost a full year, the world was just waiting. The suspense was incredible. And then, in November 2024, we got the news. And yeah, here's the gut punch. On the left, you see that image that got everyone so hopeful. And on the right, that's what they actually found when they went back. It was a rock. A weirdly shaped rock, for sure, but just a rock. Deep Sea Vision had to announce it themselves. All that money, all that incredible tech, all that hope, and it was a dead end. Just like that, the mystery was right back where it started, as deep and dark as the ocean itself. So where does that leave us? Back to square one? Was the whole deep sea theory just wrong? Well, as that door slammed shut, another one creaked open. An older theory suddenly brought back to life by a crazy new piece of evidence. Maybe they were just looking in completely the wrong place. And that's how the search suddenly shifts. We're going from the deep, dark abyss to the bright, sunny shallows of a tiny, remote island hundreds of miles away. Say hello to Nukamaro. For a long, long time, some researchers, especially a group called Tigar, have had this theory. They think Earhart didn't just crash and sink. They believe she actually managed an emergency landing on this island's reef and might have even survived for days, sending out distress calls. And the reason we're talking about this island now all comes down to something called the Taraia Object. It's this weird anomaly, this shape, that someone spotted in satellite pictures, just sitting there in the island's shallow lagoon. And there it is. Now, I know it might not look like a whole lot at first glance, but when researchers saw it, they were totally blown away by its shape and its size. And get this, it was first spotted on Apple Maps back in 2020 by a researcher just looking around. Okay, now this is the money shot. This is what gets really convincing. When you take a diagram of Earhart's plane and lay it over the object, the match is just uncanny. It's the perfect size for the main body of the plane and the tail. It's an incredibly compelling image, you have to admit. But that begs the obvious question, right? If that thing has been sitting there since 1937, how come nobody's seen it in over 80 years? Well, the answer is pretty wild. It might be all thanks to a massive storm. The whole key to this might be an event from 2015. Look at this. On the left, that's Nikomoro in February. On the right, just 2 months later, after a monster storm, Tropical Cyclone Pam, one of the strongest ever, just ripped through the area. The theory is that the storm surge basically acted like a giant power washer, blasting away decades of sand and silt and uncovering whatever this thing is. So here's how it all played out. In March 2015, that huge cyclone hits. Just a month later, boom, the object is suddenly visible in satellite photos. But nobody notices it for 5 whole years. Then, in 2020, a researcher spots it on their computer, and now that's led to a brand new expedition being planned to go check it out. So you can see how this all fits together. After the huge letdown of the deep sea search, all eyes have shifted to the shallows of Nikomoro. And there's a very real, very specific plan in the works for 2026. And this isn't just another let's go look around kind of search. They have a step-by-step plan. First, get to the island. Second, use drones to map the heck out of the object. Third, they'll actually use a probe to physically poke it and see if it's metal. And finally, they'll carefully dredge away the sediment to get a clear look. It's a proper scientific plan to finally, hopefully, get a real answer. So it all leaves us with this one kind of mind-blowing thought. After all the millions of dollars and all the super advanced deep-sea technology, could the real key to solving this 87-year-old mystery have been an act of nature? A storm that happened just a few years ago? It's pretty amazing to think about. We might finally get our answer in 2026. The search, as always, goes on.
So you think you know the story of Amelia Earhart, right? The official version is pretty straightforward. In 1937, her plane runs out of gas, crashes into the endless Pacific Ocean, and is just gone, swallowed by the sea, a legend lost without a trace. That's the story we've all been told.
But what if that tidy little conclusion isn't the whole story? What if it completely ignores a series of haunting clues, ghosts in the machine, really, that tell a totally different and much darker story? A story that actually begins after she was officially declared lost.
Because for almost a week, somebody was. See, this isn't just a story about a tragic accident. It's a cold case. And right now, we're the detectives. We're reopening the file, and we're going to follow the trail of whispers that the official search parties somehow missed.
Okay, let's open the case file. Our investigation kicks off with the first and, honestly, the most critical piece of evidence, the post-loss signals. We're talking dozens of them, logged by radio operators all over the world, from Texas to Australia, all reporting these faint, crackling transmissions they were sure were coming from Earhart's plane.
And this, right here, is the one, single, unshakable fact that this entire case pivots on. Because if even one of those signals was real, it means the Electro did not just crash and sink into the ocean. It means the plane had to be, at least in part, on solid ground. Now, the reason for this is just simple mechanics. To power the big transmitter, you needed the plane's right engine running. But if that engine was dead, you'd use a little backup generator, a dynamotor, located way down low in the body of the plane. If that plane were floating in the ocean, the dynamotor would be underwater, fried, completely useless. No power, no signal. The laws of physics tell us she was on land. Now, I know what you're thinking. Couldn't these just be hoaxes or static? Well, investigators with a group called TGAR have painstakingly analyzed over 100 of these log signals. After weeding out all the fakes and the noise, a solid group of credible transmissions is left. And the crucial part? Radio direction finding from back then placed the origin of these signals in a very specific, very remote area, the Phoenix Islands.
So, we've established a location and a means. The plane was on land, somewhere in the Phoenix Islands, and the radio was, somehow, still working. So now we have to listen to the messages themselves, because these aren't just technical data points, they are the last words of a castaway.
On July 4th, Navy operators picked up this fragmented, panicked Morse code. Just listen to the words. won't hold with us much longer above water. It sounds exactly like someone watching the tide come in, knowing their time to transmit, maybe even their time to live, is running out fast.
Then, 3 days later, another message. This time, it's a voice, a woman's voice, saying she's Earhart, and the message is chillingly specific. On coral, southwest of unknown island. She's giving clues, describing her surroundings, and then the voice just fades out. Gone.
So when you lay all these clues out on the evidence board, the picture becomes horrifyingly clear. The transmissions all paint this consistent portrait of survival after a crash landing. They weren't lost at sea. They were marooned on a reef, fighting against time and the rising water.
But after July 8th, the radio just went silent. For good. The trail went cold. And you'd think our investigation ends there, but it doesn't. It picks back up 3 years later, when a colonial officer just stumbles upon what you can only call a second crime scene.
The timeline here is just stark. For 3 years, absolutely nothing. Then, in 1940, a British expedition lands on Gardner Island, this tiny, uninhabited coral atoll right there in the Phoenix Islands, and they find the remains of a castaway.
And from the moment they found it, the officer in charge, a man named Gerald Gallagher, he suspected exactly who it was. This is his actual telegram. Look at the urgency and the name he mentions. Ask not to talk about Skull, which is just possibly that of Amelia Earhart. He knew the whole world was still looking for her. Gallagher's team documented a pretty grim scene. 13 human bones, scattered by crabs, but also clear evidence of a desperate fight for life. The remains of fires, the bones of turtles and seabirds that had been cooked and eaten, and then personal items, part of a woman's shoe, and a sextant box, exactly the type her navigator, Fred Noonan, would have been carrying.
Okay, so this is the moment in the investigation where it all comes together. We have two very distinct trails of evidence: the disembodied radio calls from 1937 and the physical remains found on a remote island in 1940. The big question is, do these two trails connect?
And the connection is, well, it's undeniable. The radio signals were tracked to the Phoenix Islands. Gardner Island is in the Phoenix Islands. The voice on the radio said they were on coral. Gardner Island is a coral atoll. The clues from the airwaves lead directly to the evidence on the ground. It's a perfect match.
And look, this map is basically the smoking gun. It shows the triangulation from the radio finders back in 37. They create this clear line, a path the signal traveled. And that path cuts directly, and I mean directly, through Gardner Island, which is now called Nikumaroro. The whispers on the radio were coming from the exact spot where the bones were found.
So at this point, the case feels solved, right? The calls, the location, the remains, the artifacts, it all points to one tragic conclusion. But every good cold case has a final twist. And this one is a truly baffling turn that throws the entire investigation into doubt. See, Officer Gallagher did everything by the book. He carefully collected all 13 bones, packed them up with the other evidence, and sent them to his superiors in Fiji for a formal medical examination. This was just standard procedure. This should have been the moment they got official confirmation.
But instead, this was the conclusion they got. A senior medical officer, a Dr. Isaac, examined the skeleton and declared the remains belonged to an elderly male of Polynesian race, not a 39-year-old female aviator of European descent. A complete and total contradiction of all the evidence.
And here is the final, absolutely maddening detail. After Dr. Isaac's report dismissed the bones as insignificant, the evidence was shelved. And then, at some point during the chaos of World War II, it was lost. The single most important piece of physical evidence in the Amelia Earhart case just disappeared.
Which leaves our cold case file with one last haunting question. Was this all just a tragic, terrible mistake? A flawed analysis by a colonial doctor in 1941 that sent the truth into a dusty storage locker to be forgotten? Or was the irrefutable evidence of Amelia Earhart's final, desperate struggle for survival deliberately mislabeled, dismissed, and then conveniently lost forever?